So, Joy, have you ever been to a Turkish prison? Do you like gladiator movies? By the way, is there anyone listening who knows how to fly a plane? Well, looks like I picked the wrong day to give up Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond. That and sniffing glue. Not that there's a difference.
Today on Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond.
Ever since I can remember, really since before I can remember, I've been obsessed with efficiency because I was born 3 weeks early. So apparently even in the womb, I was like, I don't need a full 9 months. I'm ready to go right now.
You don't need to play it safe.
This was spectacular.
And I'm going to be really honest, so I hope you don't mind.
Yeah, that's what we want.
And there will be bumps in the road. There will be twists and turns.
You needed moxie on the floor and volume.
It's the results and the connections and the improvement, the impact we have on other people's life. And that's when life becomes exciting.
Who do you turn to personally to get back on the thriving track?
I was really interested in how the world works.
Thanks for the great introduction.
It was really very simple. I just read part of your bio. Be brief, be bright, be gone.
Get ready to thrive loud with Lou Diamond.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond, connecting you to the most inspiring and amazing people that are thriving each and every day. I'm your host, Lou Diamond, and today on Thrive Loud, we have the world's first humor engineer teaching people how to get better results while having more fun. Through his company, Humor That Works, he has helped more than 25,000 people at 250 plus organizations learn to be more productive, less stressed, and happier. Combining his background in business with his experience as an international comedian, his programs are engaging, entertaining, and effective. He is a best-selling author, and at the time of this recording, his TEDx talk has been viewed by over 2.3 million people. Thrive Loud listeners. A man that is being trolled by his grandmother online, Andrew Tarvin. Andrew, how are you today?
I am doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing spectacular. I share this often with good friends that I have a tribe of people that I associate with, other fellow speakers and people that I love hanging out with. And the most ironic thing is that if I had my choice every day, I would say these are the people that I always want on the show. But they're so busy. They're all over the place. They're traveling. They're speaking in different countries. They're, just too busy to catch and trap down. And I'm excited because we finally found a window to chat with you, because you have one unique way of communicating and connecting with people in the business place, in the entertainment space. And I think our listeners are going to love to hear a little of your story of how we got someone as geeky and nerdy as you have been your entire life to become someone that is focused on helping to address humor in the workplace. So can you help the Thrive Loud community kind of tell a little bit of that journey of how you got from point A to where you are now in the best version that Andrew Tarvin can deliver?
Absolutely. And of course, I'm happy to represent the nerds and the geeks out there, because I am a proud nerd, proud geek. I have always been a nerd. If you're wondering what type of nerd, the answer is yes. So all of them, right? Math, computer science, Doctor Who, Doctor Strange, Dr. Pepper, all of them. But most specifically, I've been an engineer ever since I can remember. Really, since before I can remember, I've been obsessed with efficiency because I was born 3 weeks early. So apparently, even in the womb, I was like, I don't need a full 9 months. I'm ready to go right now. I remember in school thinking that smart for me was getting a 93% in all of my classes, because that was the lowest grade you could get and still get an A. And it got to the point that
I think they've bumped that to 94 now. Just so
but it got to the point that if I got like a 94, a 95, or the worst case scenario, 100%, I was upset because it meant that I did more work than I had to do. Right? Obsessed with efficiency. When I first moved to my apartment, I'm now living in Brooklyn. I counted out the steps that it took me to get to each of the different subways so that I could find out what is the most efficient subway stop to go to. Like, it's something that I still think about on a daily basis. How can I be more efficient? How can I save even more time? And
is that exhausting though? Is that for real, or is it exhausting?
Fun. It's kind of like, I'm going to take the steps anyway. I might as well quantify the data around it. Right? I might as well learn from the
Okay.
process. If we're going to do something over and over and over again, why not start to shave off time? Because then we gain the additional benefits of additional time to be more efficient in something else. Yeah, and so
I
that's
like
the
it.
mindset that I had. And so when I went to university, I got a degree in computer science and engineering from the Ohio State University. And after I graduated, I started working at Procter and Gamble as an IT project manager, kind of well in that wheelhouse of what you would expect. And it was at P&G that I started to realize that there's a difference between being efficient and being effective. You know, that you can be efficient with things like computers, but you can't really be efficient with things like people because they have emotions and feelings and they get sick and
Hmm.
they get tired and have to eat and sleep and all of these other things. And realizing you can't be efficient, instead, you have to be effective. And for me, as a stereotypical nerd, as a stereotypical engineer, I didn't necessarily have the skill set that I needed to be effective with people. But luckily in college, I started doing improv and stand up. My best friend wanted to start an improv comedy group. He needed people and forced me to join. And as I started to do improv and stand up, I started to realize that some of the same skills you need to be effective as an improviser on stage, or that you need to make people laugh in a stand up audience, are actually some of the same skills you need to be effective with people day to day. And so I started exploring that intersection of humor in the workplace, improv in business, happiness and productivity, and discovered that there was tremendous benefits to using humor, that it helped you to be effective with people. And so I started exploring that, started training on it, and started a business part time, fell in love with the work, made it full time. And that's what I've been doing for the past 6 years, is working with organizations on how to be more effective using humor.
For those who have had a chance, and we will provide the show links on here, Drew, as you can hear from his opening, is always very quick-witted with good commentary, and he interjects that obviously into a lot of this work, and it's that fine balance of almost stimulating your brain and making you feel good. And there's an expression, maybe you can talk about this because it would be really good, because someone quoted you recently and said, and maybe you can word it effectively, the importance of smiling each day. Can you talk about that? Because not everybody is funny, not everyone is witty as you, yet you talk about little minor things that can be done to start to inject the process of tapping into humor everywhere, and a little bit about just the effect of a smile.
Yeah, so I think that one thing to kind of understand is that humor is more broad than comedy. Like when we think of humor, when we hear the word humor, most often we think of laughter, we think of funny, maybe we think of stand-up comedians. And when we're talking about humor in the workplace, we're not talking about making the workplace funny. We're talking about making the workplace a little bit more fun. And so maybe what we do isn't going to be laugh out loud hysterical, something that you would get a Netflix special for, but it's going to make, your coworker or yourself smile. And so one of the things that I talk about is, how do you get started, is to simply think about one smile per hour. What's something that you can do each hour of your day that brings a smile to your face or the face of someone else? Because when we smile, we start to improve our own mood. We start to release dopamine throughout the body so that we feel a little bit happier. And when we see someone else smile, we as humans have mirror neurons in our brain. So we're primed to mirror that behavior. So if someone else smiles, that will cause us to smile. And that's how it starts to spread. That's why Victor Borg said that the shortest distance between two people is a smile. Two people smile and you have that instant kind of connection.
I love that. Okay, so here's a connection that I would like to recognize. When you started in college doing improv work, and I've also seen that you do stand up, and there is a difference. I want to understand a little bit of the inner workings of the brain of Andrew Tarvin, which is scaring me a little bit. There, with all those ways that you're thinking about how efficient and effective you can be as a stand-up comic, how are you grading yourself after each performance that you deliver? Because I've heard lots of different things, whether it was, you killed it or you bombed. I want to know what goes through your mind, because I have a feeling that there might be a little bit more math involved in understanding that.
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of, kind of logic in comedy to begin with. I sometimes explain comedy as math with words. There's kind of a logic process that goes through it where it's like this idea plus this kind of phrasing equals laughter, or maybe it doesn't. It's very much an iterative approach. Humor is, and particularly comedy, is interesting because it is simple. Something is funny if it makes someone laugh, but that doesn't mean that it is easy. And so as a comedian, you're constantly getting things out there just to test it. And that's what we're doing with iterative approach. If you think about agile project management or scrum masters and stuff like that, it's a whole iterative approach, exactly how we create and make products now in a lot of different ways. It's similar to how do we create stand-up. For me, there is a little bit more science to it, and I'm pushing for more and more science. So there's a calculation called laughs per minute, LPM, where you basically take how long you've gone for, and then how many laughs you get, and how big those laughs are. And they used to do this for movies as well. So Airplane, one of my favorite movies of all time, it has one of the highest laughs per minute score in terms of it's just constant punchlines throughout. It's a very, very funny movie. You can do the same thing for a stand-up set. So I'm starting to look at that a little bit more to say, okay, what is my laughs per minute in this set? Is this, story funnier than this story? And how do I actually look at the data behind this? Because that's going to give me more insight. So you can get it analytical about it. Some people are like, doesn't that destroy the magic? And it's like, well, not for me, because I think analytics and data and quantification is magical in and of itself. So I love that process. It's not necessarily to say that it's for everyone, that in order to be funny, you have to record and understand how many times you're making people laugh. But for people like me, it's something that we enjoy doing.
So, and thank you for answering that, because I think it is great. The point that you're making here is that you actually enjoy just the data behind it. And that's part of what's passionate about doing that work, which now makes me want to balance these two questions together. When you're doing the stand-up or improv, any type of thing where you're purely trying to entertain versus doing the workshops or delivering your keynote messages to companies and audiences where you're actually helping to educate. Is there one that you prefer doing more, or does each one strengthen the other? That's what I'm trying to understand, to what makes you tick and which helps make you better.
They absolutely both strengthen each other. And the one that I love is I love speaking, because speaking is stand up with a message. It is me getting an audience to laugh and be engaged and to start to think about things a little bit differently. But then for me to also say, hey, and if you want to make a change, if you want to make an improvement, here's how to do that. That's much harder to do on a Friday late show when people have had 3 or 4 drinks in them. You can kind of make them laugh at absurdities of things, but then you can't be like, and here's what you do to change that. It's a different environment, but they both feed each other. When I'm doing stand-up, I'm doing nerdy stand-up. I'm still talking about similar things, and I'm bringing in a little bit of messaging. When I'm speaking, I'm still doing some stand-up and some comedy, but I'm adding more of a message to it. And that's the main reason why I do stand-up now, is to prep for additional events. I go and do it, and it's a way for me to workshop material so that I know once it makes an audience laugh at Friday late night, after a couple of drinks, I know that it's then going to work in the boardroom the next day and serves these purposes or these reasons why I'm using it. So this is, maybe it's a question you would ask or not, but the reason why I'm so passionate about this is because humor is effective. Like the fact that it is fun, it makes things more enjoyable. That's a nice bonus, but I love that it actually works. So we can use humor as a way to get people to pay attention, or we can use humor to help people understand something longer, or to increase our ability to do a task, or, all these, we have 30 plus benefits to using humor in the workplace that are all backed by research, case studies, and real world examples. And so I'm using humor for specific goals to achieve something else, and that achieving something else is, helping humans be more effective.
I like it. And it's so interesting, because to the common person or person seeing it outside who recognizes that this person does stand up, he does comedy, and he's got humor, the inclination that people will have walking in is I'm about to be entertained. And you're actually changing that message, which is actually great, because their expectation might be, I've got somebody who's supposedly funny and he's talking about humor in the workplace or humor that works. But the message is actually about how they could be more efficient. So they actually learn something. So even your delivery, which no one knows when a comedian is what they're going to say when they get up there, that you took something away from it, is packaged in the way that your whole process works. I don't know if you've ever thought of how that actually works, but you're encompassing your message even in the way that you package and brand yourself.
Yeah, and it's a pro and a con, but the beauty of humor is that if you can get people to laugh, then you can get them to listen. And if you can get them to listen, you can then get them to learn something, right? You can tell them something in that moment while they're paying attention. And part of the problem, part of the reason that my company is called Humor That Works is, one, it's a little bit of a play on words, which I absolutely love. But two, I'm trying to promote humor status, because most people think of a humor as a nice to have. Right? Like, no one hates to laugh. No one hates feeling joy in their body. But most of the time, people are like, yeah, if I enjoyed my work a little bit more, that would be great, but oh well. But the reality is that in today's overworked, underappreciated, stress-filled, sleep-deprived world, humor is a must-have and has all these benefits. And so I'm trying to kind of elevate that status of why humor is so important, and that when we enjoy our work, we actually get better results.
Hey there! If you're enjoying how Lou is connecting with this guest in this interview, then just imagine how impactful he can be in person. As an international speaker and consultant, Lou Diamond is all about getting organizations to thrive through the power of connecting. To learn more about how you can hire Lou to speak at your company, your conference, or your next event, head on over to loudiamond.net and click the Book Lou button to learn more. He'll truly get everyone to thrive loud. All right, let's get back to the show.
And Drew, one point to your initial comment that you'll test out certain materials at the comedy club and then work it into some of the work that you're doing. Has it ever happened where you were getting hits and works in one place where it was being perceived as funny in the environment, and then you brought it into the business environment and it didn't get the reaction that it did? Has that happened? Because, like, even through the testing, but it didn't work in the other place?
Yeah, I mean, every audience is different. And so, I just got back from Germany earlier this week. So some of the material that worked great in Germany is a little bit different than what might work here in the States, or specifically in New York. Or I was in Kuwait about a month ago, and some of the material there that normally goes really, really well was received okay, but they loved. So I do this joke sometimes, particularly with international groups, around language. And so I don't know if you know this, but there's like a difference between British English and American English, right? I have heard. In the UK they say lift, we say elevator. In the UK they say buggy, we say cart. And so one of the things that they say in Europe a lot of times is they will say toilets. Instead of saying, oh, I'm going to go to the bathroom, especially out in Europe, if you're in a public place, they'll say, I'm going to go to the toilets, or where are the toilets, right? And I like that because that's more accurate. Because bathroom, when we say that, if we're at a restaurant, we're like, where's the bathroom? There's no bath in that room, right?
In the room.
And
right.
so I'm like, oh, okay, I want to use toilets. I want to say that. I think it's more accurate. So I was here in New York after I got back from an event that I was doing in the UK a couple of years ago, and I was like, I'm going to start using toilets a little bit more. So I went up, I was in a Starbucks, had to go to the bathroom, had to use the toilets, and went up to the barista, and I was like, excuse me, where are the toilets? And she was confused. She was like, in the bathroom? And that joke crushed in Kuwait. Like, it normally gets a decent laugh, but it was like very, very funny. And then recently, I have the jokes in my TEDx talk. I do some math pickup lines to kind of make a point around confidence and everything.
Yep.
And usually goes pretty well. I did that when I was in Prague not too long ago, and it got an applause break. Like, they loved it. Whereas other times I've done jokes where I'm like, yeah, this is going to go great. The worst that I've done recently in terms of stand-up was in Malaysia 2 years ago, and it's because I didn't understand the audience. I did some material that normally works in Europe, and I was in Malaysia, in Kuala Lumpur, and did some jokes around the metric system, and they were like not all that excited about it. And at first I was like, maybe just culturally, maybe they're not that expressive in Malaysia, because some cultures, sometimes you do an event and people will come up to you, like in the event, they're not laughing all that much, but then they'll come up to you afterwards and they'll be like, that's the funniest program that I've ever seen. You are hilarious. And as speakers, this, we say, if you enjoyed the program, then tell your face, right? Make sure that you're expressive and everything. So I was like, maybe that's the case with this group in Malaysia. And I thought maybe it's just a quieter group. And then the comedian that got up after me crushed it. Like, if you were listening to the audience, you thought he was the funniest person in the world. So it clearly was just me. And so it kind of just speaks to the idea.
Or are you?
Exactly. Yeah, I was finally getting them. But it's just the idea that, when I work with groups on how to use humor to be more effective, one of the big components that we teach around the strategy of using humor is what we call a humor map. And your humor map is your medium, your audience, and your purpose. So the medium is how you're going to execute that humor. Is it in the email or a phone call or one-on-one or, in a presentation to a group? Who is the audience? What do they know? What do they need? What do they expect? And what is your relationship to them? So, the joke that you might make with a coworker that you've known for years is different than what you might make with a client that you're meeting for the very first time. And then finally, and most important, is what is your purpose? What's your reason for using humor? Are you using it so that people pay attention? Are you using it to build rapport with someone? Are you using it for yourself to relieve stress and show up more present for your family when you get home? What's the reason that you're actually using it? And that humor map helps. That audience piece of it is really important. And knowing that, a stand-up audience on a late night Friday is going to be different than a Monday morning kickoff to a conference.
We're here with Andrew Tarvin, who is just putting all the math and all the systematic things about what you need to know about humor that works. And I'm loving every minute of this. I want to talk a little bit about you specifically, Drew. As I love to ask this question to all the guests that come on the program. You are traveling around the world. You are balancing your comedy, balancing the work that you're doing with these organizations to help them understand how to be more efficient and have more fun in the workplace. Every now and then you have an off day and you're not quite yourself. When you have trouble thriving, who or what practice do you seek to get back on the thriving track?
Get back on the thriving track. I think this is, I guess it's a cliche thing to say, but it's around seeking out humor. It's around seeking out fun, whether that is through, I love watching, stand-up specials on Netflix. I love, I have certain friends calling up friends sometimes of just needing to have a good, fun, playful conversation. But it's really being proactive about strategically disengaging or strategically renewing, right? Like this idea that we have to take breaks so that we can come back to things and be a little bit more recharged, a little bit more refocused. And I know for myself, if I'm not taking a break and not having that fun, then things start to get a little bit harder. And then I end up taking that break and I come back to it. And that problem that seemed so daunting before, that phrase that I could not figure out, or that, initiative that I was working on for a client that I could not get, suddenly seems a lot easier, seems a lot different, because I'm more refreshed, more re-engaged. And also we know that humor helps to unlock new ideas. In one study, they found that students who watched a 30-minute comedy video were more likely to be able to solve, or nearly 4 times more likely to solve a problem than students who didn't. And so for me, that's just justification to say, hey, if I need to solve some problems and I'm not feeling it, I have scientific proof that I should go and watch some YouTube videos or hop on Reddit for a little bit.
It's a good distraction. Why are you not doing the work behind your desk? Well, I really need to get myself back on my game, so I got to go watch this video. I love that. I love how you're tapping into it. Okay, so as I understand this, and I've seen a little bit of it, I've heard a little bit of it. You somewhere in your past have an affinity or passion for putting words together that sound great and rhyme, maybe even arguably rap. So can you explain maybe a little bit of some of the raps that you did maybe as a student or as a kid, and where that actually went to, or maybe, I guess, what may have even driven you into this focus of comedy, because I guess maybe your career as a rapper never really got off the ground.
Yeah, so I love wordplay. I love puns. That's what my social media is all about. Twitter is basically just puns and everything. And that's always been a little bit true. So the first thing that I wanted to be when I was growing up was an international soccer superstar. That was, goal number one. If you've ever seen any pictures of me or met me in person, you realize that I never went to the weight room. I'm not big enough to do that. I was born 8.3 pounds and then stayed that way till I was 15 years old. Right. I'm a skinny guy. So then next in high school, I wanted to be an international hip hop superstar. I grew up listening to hip hop and loved it. And, if you can rhyme wordplay, that's when people like, if you say if you say a pun in a stand up audience, a lot of times people will groan. But if you then start to rhyme it, you say it in spoken word or in hip hop, then people are like, yeah, that's cool. I like that. And so in high school, there was a period of time. Actually, it was a way for me to stay engaged in work. I had to work in a factory one summer. And so what I would do while I was working in the factory is that I would come up with rhymes in my head. And then on my break, I would write them down in a rap notebook. And the goal was maybe to turn it into something. And it never happened because the rhymes were terrible. So sometimes the beauty, though, is, and this is where humor comes into play, is I now do this as part of my programs. I will share this story, and now I get to rap in front of people and get rewarded for it in a way. So, one of the raps that I'll talk about, one of the ones that I found that was kind of the proof that I shouldn't do it, one of the lines in it was hydrogen plus oxygen 2, bonded together with covalent glue. What do you get? Just a thing called water. Yeah, it's steaming up and it's only getting hotter.
And then funny is I even know it. I've heard you do it a bunch of times. It still giggles, but that's the geek. That's the geek in me. It's connecting on that. And obviously, yes, that's not going to reach, levels of other artists that, have been more successful. I don't know, maybe.
Exactly. It's not Kendrick Lamar level of lines, but, and there's not a huge market for chemistry rap. But the fact that I've now incorporated into my speaking, it's taking something that I'm passionate about and infusing it into my work. And that's part of what we train on, is when you can bring your outside perspective, when you can bring the things that you're passionate about into your work, you're going to enjoy that work a little bit more. And that's why, our mutual friend, John Garrett, has a great message around what is your and. It's not just, you aren't just an accountant, you're something else, because what you are is more than what you do. And I think that's such a great message that he's sharing with a lot of people. And it's one of the ways that we can bring humor in, is when we bring in that passion.
It was good. And by the way, just for the Thrive Loud listeners, I was going to actually just play the music in the background for him, to start getting him going around it. But I was a little slow to the trigger. So we know that he's a big fan of Flow Rider, which he recently learned actually was from Florida, which you thought was brilliant. So I know that that's part of it.
Yeah. That blew my mind. So for the listeners that if you didn't know this, Flow Rider, the rapper Flow Rider, got his name from his home state of Florida, and he put a space in it. That's amazing to me. It took me going to the state of Florida to realize that. And I think that that's, such a cool thing.
I do like that you had an 8 Mile moment there where you had a little rap notebook and working in a factory, just like, he was writing his rhymes down. I could totally see the Eminem, overlap between the two of you. Just looking, actually, if you paired the two of you together, I can't think of anything more opposite than, except for maybe the skin color. That might only be it.
Right. That's about the only, and our love for, Eminem is a huge fan of wordplay. And I do it hopefully with a positive message and more of a focus. He does it more technically gifted and lyrically, his, the way that he puts words together in compound syllable rhymes and all that is quite impressive.
Let's do this right now. Let's take all the admin stuff out of the way here, Drew. If you could share with the Thrive Lab listeners all the places people can find you, websites, links of things that are out there, anything that's coming down the pipe, some things in your pipeline, and we'll put it all in the show notes. But when they hear it from you, it always sounds better.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think one last thing I'll kind of touch on that will lead into this is everything that we've talked about around humor is a skill. And if it's a skill, it means it can be learned. And so what I've been doing and what we've been doing with Humor That Works is really reverse engineering that process, taking things apart, looking at how humor works so that we can put it back together again and teach people. And we firmly believe that we can teach anyone to be funnier. Not necessarily quote unquote funny, get a Netflix special or be on Comedy Central or whatever, but to be funnier than where they are. And so we provide a lot of resources around that. So if you're looking for ways to incorporate humor into your work a little bit more, learning how to be funnier, you can find all information about that at humorthatworks.com. Working on a book right now that is on the business book, that is a business book on humor that will be coming out within the next probably 6 months or so. So that'll be kind of that one cohesive resource. And then also My social media, so Drew Tarvin, DrewTarvin, on everything, whether that is Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, at Drew Tarvin. But that's where I post a lot of humor stuff, the research that we find, but then also puns and interesting photos and all types of good stuff, just to kind of also help you laugh and take a break from the day and enjoy your work a little bit more.
And for those like myself that happen to follow Drew with it, I always feel bad for him because I feel he does come up with some of the wittier puns of when he's traveling or just comments or observations. And I feel like, he's got to keep one-upping himself, which he does. And as we understand, and for those that'll get a chance to, we'll put a link to his very popular TEDx talk. His grandmother will certainly opine or reply to that. Is she still active on the on the communication front?
She is. I mean, I think the celebrity's gotten a little bit to her head. Cause she's the start and end of the TEDx talk. And for most people that comment on it, they're like, your grandmother's amazing. And so I think it's gone a little bit to her head, but no, she's still humble. She's still great. She's still commenting on things. It's pretty fantastic.
We referenced this earlier, and it is the way we wrap up our show here. Drew Tarvin, your all-time favorite movie?
Airplane. Oh, it's one of the funniest movies of all time. That's proven by science with laughs per minute, but it's also just so good. Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious, and stop calling me Shirley. I will tell you that that movie was on a VHS tape in my home growing up, and my two younger sisters and we would watch this over and over and over again, and all we would do all day long is quote it, and literally. We would, when somebody would ask a general question and say, something along the lines of, oh my God, Aunt Mildred had to go to the hospital. What? The hospital? What is it? It's a building where a lot of sick people and patients are, but that's not important right now. That was literally my childhood growing up. So I want the Thrive Loud listeners to know that I get the answers from our guests ahead of time I ask them what their favorite movie is to put it in there, mostly so we can produce and put great quality quotes, which we will at the end of this episode. However, he's the first one to come up with one of my favorite movies, Airplane. So thank you, Drew.
You're welcome. Well, I mean, thank you for having good taste in movies.
Well, it is important, and it is sad. The late Leslie Nielsen obviously has left an impression on us. Did you know, by the way, that before the Police Squad, or really before the movie Airplane, that Leslie Nielsen was a serious actor? Like, he never did any comedy. He was actually just that. And then from that point on until his dying days, that's all he did was comedy. It's really just a random stat here.
I think I've heard of that. And it's proof that maybe he learned how to use humor. Or maybe it was his seriousness that made it so good.
Whatever it is, I think it's rubbed off a little on you. And imagine if he had the ability to hear you give your message on early on. He would have started earlier. Who knows?
Yeah.
Drew Tarvin, totally a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on Thrive Loud. And I know our listeners are going to learn something, giggle a little bit, laugh, and hopefully take something with it. Thank you so much for coming on the program.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
And to all our Thrive Loud listeners out there, thank you for joining us. And until next time, keep thriving onward and upward. And remember, be brief, be bright, be gone.
What was it we had for dinner tonight?
Well, we had a choice, steak or fish.
Yes, I remember. I had lasagna.
You've been listening to Thrive Loud with your host, Lou Diamond. Make sure to subscribe on iTunes, Overcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. And follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Thrive Loud. Or find us on the web at thriveloud.com.